G-O-D!
We're gonna start this off with how'd you first get into music?
Let's see. My parents are huge classical music fans. My mother's a choral singer, sang in the Cleveland Orchestra chorus for like 35 years. But they're huge classical fans. And they got me piano lessons when I was 6. And I think even music theory lessons like earlier than that, where I was learning the clefs and how to write a note and stuff like that. And then I didn't really take to piano. And then in school, when I was 9 in 4th grade, they offered free lessons. So I chose the trombone, which I just chose that because I'd seen an older kid playing one at camp and I thought it was cool. I mean, I was fascinated by it. My mom wanted me to be a cellist, but I was like, nah. Um, and so I just started playing trombone and ended up taking lessons and picked up the guitar when I was 11. Uh, my parents my mother had a guitar. She was like a fingerstyle folk guitarist at one point, although she stopped, but as a teenager, she was doing that. And so there was instruments around the house. And also my father was hugely into hi-fi equipment and recording. And so he had a reel-to-reel deck as well as a nice cassette deck. And he was actually a physics professor, and he knew everything about electronics and how computers work and everything like that. And uh, he would buy kits from this company called Heathkit. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
And they would sell the parts, and then you would assemble your own TV or your own stereo. And so our stereo receiver was a Heathkit that he had built, and the two TVs in the house he had also built from kits. And they both took vacuum tubes and stuff. I mean, it was wild. But he taught me all that. He taught me how to solder when I was like 8. You know what I mean? And he was a real Renaissance man, actually. He passed away in 2020, but he was a gardening whiz as well, and as I said, just a very learned guy too. And I really looked up to him. He had a lot of respect for musicians, and I think I got a lot of it from him, the message that, oh, this is a respectable thing to do. Uh, respectable if you're successful. If you're not successful, we live in America and it's not respectable. But that's another story. But anyway, that was my beginning, and he got me recording. So I would record me and my friends from about age 6 or 7. We were forming little groups and writing little songs and recording them and fooling around with the echo effect that we could get from the reel to reel. And he just turned us loose. I would get like, he got me like these little Radio Shack microphones for Christmas, and then I would just, record. So when I was 11, we decided to have an actual band, and I got 2 friends, and it was a piano player, myself on guitar, and a drummer. And the drummer had never played drums. I'd known him for a couple years, but with that childhood, I've said this before in interviews, with this childhood logic that we'd heard that his older brother had a guitar and liked rock music, therefore this guy should be our drummer. And we didn't know him at all, But so we kind of like picked him to be our drummer, and then we had this toy drum kit. But we actually ended up playing lots of gigs like this, and we're the hit of the school and everything like that. But there was no YouTube back then. It didn't get beyond our school system, or basically even beyond our elementary school, to be honest. So anyway, that band morphed into a series of garage bands and more normal sorts of things that teenagers do, with that same drummer and other people. And I still play with those guys to this day whenever I can. so that was my beginnings. And we played our first professional gig. We played many school gigs and dances and all that kind of stuff. And then the first professional gig we booked at a college bar, and we got away with it the first time. The second time, somebody called the cops because we were all underage, and the cops came and busted us. And my mom was there and saw me get busted playing underage in a bar. And it was so anyhow. That was the origins, and then but at the same time, I was learning classical trombone too, and playing in different orchestras, the school orchestra, but also community orchestras. I was a charter member of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, which is required an audition and stuff like that. And trombone gigs fell in my lap because trombone was really, it's not like now where you see many trombone players out there. It was really unpopular. It was not, it had fallen off the map essentially. And there was no, for example, like when jazz came back real big in the early 80s with Wynton Marsalis and Branford Marsalis, there was no equivalent trombone player. They have a brother who plays trombone who's out there now, who's amazing, Delfeo. But there was no equivalent of trombone. There just wasn't. So if you played trombone, you were looking to the past, to Tommy Dorsey or Glenn Miller, you know what I mean? Or if you once you got into jazz, of course, J.J. Johnson and Curtis Fuller and all these great people that some of whom I was lucky enough to meet and hang out with once I got to New York. But yeah, so I was playing classical trombone, and that was part of the basis on which I got to Columbia University, which brought me to New York. I agreed to play in the orchestra there as part of my deal to get in there, and then I did that for a couple of years. But I immediately started meeting musicians and doing other gigs, and within a year had headed downtown and was hanging out down here playing with the Flophouse Orchestra and City Beat, which is a classic ska band. I did a couple gigs with them early on in like '88. So that was the beginning. I was a student at Columbia playing in the jazz band and the orchestra, and I met some musicians who were already playing in bands downtown, and they invited me, and I just started doing that.
So, is
So
that how you fell in love with ska, or how did that come about?
that's interesting. Like I didn't really know from ska. I'd seen a couple reggae bands in Cleveland. Growing up in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, we had this thing called the Coventry Street Fair, which is on the street where the grog shop is located. For those who've been there, they used to have a massive street fair every year because that street has a really interesting history. It was originally like the hippie area, but then on the other side of the street was the bikers, so they were warring with each other actually, and at the same time there were drugs being dealt on the street. So you had the police also as a third group that was spying on the other two groups. This all happened when I was a little kid, going to school at the school across the street. I wasn't aware of it, but it's an interesting area. But anyway, so they had this thing called the street fair, and they would have live bands. And there's a local musician in Cleveland named Carlos Jones, who's the preeminent reggae musician in Cleveland, and he has a band called First Light. So I saw them, and they had a horn section. I saw this band from California called Crucial DBC play live a couple times. And what's crazy about that is I'm now friends with the guy that was the trombone player on those gigs when I was like 13, watching the band. It's actually this guy who goes by Scabone Stan. I don't know if you've heard of this cat. He's played with the Toasters and he plays with Angela Moore out in LA. He's an LA based guy, but he's from Ohio. Uh, anyhow, so that was my intro to reggae, and that and driving around with my high school girlfriend in her 83 Honda Civic with AM radio only, and we would listen to the oldies station, and they would play Desmond Decker on there, the Israelites they would play, and I think they played two songs by him. '07 they played as well, and so I didn't know what that was, but I mean they played it in rotation. See, like oldies radio in the '80s was awesome because it was basically early '50s to mid '70s, right? There was no, '80s was new stuff, you know. So so anyhow, so I heard that, and then strangely enough, I was a bargain shopper. I never had much money, even after I started working as a busboy and stuff. Um, so I would shop the bargain racks and stuff. And I found this T-shirt of the Wailing Wailers for like $5. And I didn't know who the hell it was, but I knew it looked cool. It was Peter, Bunny, and Bob in the Rude Boy suits, from that album cover.
Yep, yep,
And
yep.
I didn't know what that was, but I bought it, even though it was like a little too small. I still wore it, and like I had no idea what the hell it was. So I came to New York and in '87 and started playing with the orchestra, started playing with the jazz band at Columbia, and met a sax player in the jazz band, and who I've lost touch with him since, but he invited me to play with this band called City Beat, which have you heard of them?
No, no.
Okay, well they were like in that '80s era, like they warmed up for the Toasters a lot. They played with Urban Blight and the Toasters. They had a song on New York City Breaking and Entering or whatever, the Moonska, the original Moonska comp.
Yeah, yeah, I'm following.
Yeah, but I don't think they ever put out an album. I recorded 3 songs with them that never came out. But that was my intro to ska, and they were actually a really good band. They were this guy named Gopal was the leader. He was a really great guitar player. Unfortunately, perished in the World Trade Center. He like worked for Kenner Fitzgerald, I think, or something, and died in 9/11. But he was and the lead singer was this guy Terrence Hope, who is I believe the grandson of the jazz great Elmo Hope. So it was like a pretty hip band. And the other guy that was in the band was the bass player, was Alex Valenti of the Skadanks, who I've also known ever since then. And I met Django back then as well in the '80s. And so that was my intro. I played in this band called the Flophouse Society Orchestra around the same time as City Beat, and that was run by this guy named Bosco, who's now deceased, but he was sort of an associate of the Beastie Boys. He was a friend of theirs and grew up with them. And so he had this band called Flophouse Society Orchestra, which played traditional jazz music by uh, like King Oliver, Louis Armstrong, stuff like that. But played it with like punk rock energy and with basically punk rock musicians who really hadn't really studied that style until now, including me. And because it's interesting that music, the chords are actually really quite simple a lot of the time. So it's not a stretch, and the energy is also very high. So it worked. And we would, mind you, I was the third trombone player to play in this band. It was originally Fred Parcells from Black 47, then King Django as Jeff Baker was the trombone player, and then I took it over from him. So that's how I met Django way back then. And he left them to concentrate on the Boilers, actually, which you've probably heard of the Boilers. Have
Yeah.
you? Yeah, right. So anyhow, I was a kid. I was 18, 19, getting my entree into that. Actually, yeah, 18, 19, yeah, getting my entree into that world. And at the same time, I was starting to work as a writer with this music publishing company, Second Floor Music, which is where Mephiskapheles trumpet player Osho worked also. And so through that job, I met many jazz greats, and I got to interview them as part of the job and study their discographies and their life stories. And that led to all kinds of great work for me. I ended up writing for Jazz Times magazine for 10 years on the recommendation of no less than Ira Gitler, the great jazz critic, who became my mentor for a number of years. And I worked for him writing hundreds of entries in the Encyclopedia of Jazz that was published in 2005, like the final version of Leonard Feather and Ira Gitler's Encyclopedia of Jazz, which is a definitive work. So I was lucky to encounter these people and really be chosen. Actually, I was actually chosen to do this based on the fact I understood jazz. Even if I couldn't play it the best at that point, I understood it, and I came from a musician's perspective, but I was also a standout English student, writer, and all that. So these people who were trying to make jazz popular again, essentially, and give some recognition to some of the greats who were at that point elderly, but had not been recognized properly. They recruited me as a young guy to write their stories, to interview them from my youthful perspective, and then write their stories, which I did. I wrote 8 pamphlet length books, like 50-page books with discography. Unfortunately, never came out. Um, but it did lead to getting the job at Jazz Times and the Encyclopedia of Jazz, and I've written for other reference books and things like that. Um, so that's like a sideline of mine is like editing, writing, proofreading. I've also worked in advertising for a number of years as a proofreader and manager. So it's all in the service of music, though. I wouldn't be doing all this if I didn't want to keep the band on the road and keep myself, and the trombone close to each other, you know. So
Yeah, that's fucking awesome. That's awesome.
thanks. Yeah, that was a lot. Sorry about that. I hope I
No,
was.
no, no, you're fine. You're fine. That is a lot. But that's fucking great. That's great information. I fucking love jazz, and that you gotta meet all the fucking greats.
It was
And
unbelievable. It was mind blowing, bro. It was literally. I mean, I knew jazz in the sense of being a trombone player, getting a jazz album for Christmas, playing in the junior high and high school jazz band, which is like a watered down version of jazz at that point in Ohio. But still enough of the authentic thing to get an idea at least. And then to come to New York, and the first concert I did with the Columbia Jazz Band was where we backed up Joe Henderson, the incredible tenor tenor sax giant, and on a bunch of arrangements of his that had not been heard in since the 60s, like from a rehearsal band they had in the 60s. And we premiered this with Joe on sax, and it was utterly mind blowing. I mean, the dude was, I mean, you're talking about the highest level. You're talking about doing a concert with Bach or Beethoven. You know what I mean? It's like mind blowing. So that was and there were so many great guys in the band too that were not Columbia students because Columbia was not a music school. It did not have the arrangement it has now with Juilliard. It was strictly an academic, read tons of books and write papers type of place. So they would get ringers to play in the band, though, from nearby Manhattan School of Music. So these guys were badasses in the band. So it was a great band. So that was my intro to sort of the jazz thing in New York. And then, as I said, I was selected to work in this job interviewing these people. And then I found them to be incredibly gracious to me because I didn't know anything really. I was super green, like coming from Ohio, the suburbs. Like I didn't know anything. And so I would go in there and ask. I would research thoroughly beforehand. I was like well trained as a researcher. So I would go to the Lincoln Center Library. I would get out all the microfilm and I would study every interview that this guy did, and I would, know exactly when he left Count Basie and made his solo album, and then he went back to this other band or whatever. Like I knew it all, so I could ask these guys really intelligent questions, and they really appreciated that because as you may know, there's
well, see,
a
now
lot of
I'm
music.
intimidated. Sitting
What's
here,
that? Why is that?
I'm sitting here interviewing you, who interviewed all the fucking great jazz. Like, well,
Oh,
now,
yeah, I got a lot of experience as an interviewer, man. I do, but you know what? Not as a broadcast interviewer. I have
yeah,
experience sitting on the couch with the guy with the tape recorder, and what I find is when I do a podcast like the one we did together recently, I'm
yeah.
interrupting people. I'm saying, yeah, and stuff like that when I should just zip it. So it's a different skill set, actually. But I do know how to ask probing questions, and I do know how to follow a thread of where I think somebody's leading, or you know what I mean, those kind of things. But I haven't worked as a journalist in quite some time, other than like the Mephiskapheles newsletter that we had during the pandemic, or I mean, I write all the time. I jot down ideas and lyrics and stuff, but I've not, gone and tried to get a job at a magazine or something because frankly, I worked my butt off doing that, and it paid nothing. And but I looked at it as school, I looked at it as like grad school or something. I mean, I have a 4-year degree in English, but I didn't know anything about life until I became a musician and started talking to people and really learning about it. But the funny part is I thought I knew so much because I'd interviewed so many people. I knew everything that could happen. I thought, you know, I said, oh, this will be easy. I'll just avoid every pitfall there is because I've already read about it. I know about it, you know. It just doesn't work that way. Like everybody's got to make their mistakes, and you know what I mean? It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you can't avoid that. So no matter how much you know, you think you know, no,
yeah,
it is a process of many are called, few are chosen. You know, many try, few can actually hang and make a career, you know, over the long term. So that's that's kind of what I got from interviewing all these guys because all of them were struggling in life. Most of them, some were successful, but many, you know, were struggling to gain recognition again or to get paid for what they'd done previously and stuff like that. So it was really eye opening and interesting. Plus, it introduced me to so much great music. You know,
word, word, word.
yeah, I'm very fortunate that you know I'm very grateful that all that happened to me. And but I couldn't turn it down. I mean, I once somebody of that caliber, like I remember hanging out with Curtis Fuller. He was like the second or third guy I interviewed, and he's one of the greatest, most legendary trombone players of all time. And I remember I sat with him for 3 days, interviewing him, and I had about three 90-minute tapes full, you know, by the end. And and at the end of it, he said, "Well, listen, Greg, you know, it's been nice talking to you, but you know, now that you're in this, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with it? You know, what are you going to? You're in the club now, so what's going to be your contribution? You know." And that, I mean, to me at 19, I was like, you know, like I hadn't thought about music as a career. It was always a hobby because for my parents it was a hobby, you know. And that is what like the beginning of where I was like, oh, if this guy is telling me I got something valid to offer, like I'd be insane to ignore that, you know. So that was the beginning, and then my good friends, many of whom I've been playing music with forever, because this is what this is about. We make music with our friends, right? And spread the joy. I mean, that's really ultimately what we're here to do, I think. And some of them said, "Hey, look, you know, what do you mean you're not sure you can do this? Like, come on, just go for it. What, you're young? Like, what's the worst that can happen? You know?" Well, the worst that can happen, of course, is bankruptcy, divorce, getting sued for 25 million bucks. Like, you know, there's a lot that can go wrong, but I still wouldn't change a thing, honestly.
Word, word. So let's move along. How'd you get in find yourself in Mephiskapheles?
Well, I met Osho, the trumpet player, through the Columbia band. He was one of those ringers I was talking about. He was the one of the soloists in the band, the outstanding soloists. Um, Ironically, the other outstanding trumpet soloist was the guy who is now known as Dr. Mike Jones of the plastic surgery reality show on BET. But he was a killer jazz musician, as a matter of fact, believe it or not. Obviously, a man of many skills. But so I met Osho, and I didn't really know him at the time. But then the band director is another trumpet player named Don Sickler, trumpet player, arranger, concert promoter in jazz, and he's the one who gave me the job working for him. It was his publishing company. And so my first day of work, I go there, and Osho's sitting there because Osho's the guy that puts the charts together for that company. Like he assembles all the parts into the score and, you know, does all that stuff on the computer. And he's had that job for a long time. I assume he's still doing it. Uh, so anyway, one day I had this job in the summer of '89. I was living in a sublet in Chinatown. I was riding my bike to work up Sixth Avenue every day. And one day I came to work and Osho handed me this cassette tape and said, "Oh, check this out. This is this band I joined a few months ago. It's really good. And we're thinking of getting rid of our trombone player because he's not so good. And, you know, would you be interested? Give it a listen, you know? And so I listened to it. It was the demo, the original Meth demo. And I was, yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was funny, very musical. So I was like, sure. I mean, I was a freelancer anyway. Anyone who asked me to play, I would try once. If I didn't like your music, maybe I wouldn't go back, but, or if the situation was weird, but I was like, sure, I'll try this, you know? So we rehearsed at a series of different studios. The first one was Funkadelic, not Funkadelic, Big Fun on East 23rd Street. And so I went there and we had a great rehearsal and I was introduced to the music. I'd gone to see the band a couple times live too prior to that. And that's where I met Michael Reich, actually. So I'd met them a couple times and then I went to rehearsal. And then after rehearsal, I went out drinking with Brian Martin, the keyboard player, and we became best friends ever since that night. And then I just kept coming to rehearsal and the gigs just kept picking up because the band was just popular from day one. Like I joined about 6 months in. They had started in January of 91, their first gig, and they were popular from day one. People just had they had a buzz. They had these great songs. Doomsday was already being played, and they had a bunch of songs that we no longer play, but they had Doomsday, Satanic Debris was a real early one. Dance Me Not, of course, is on the demo. Eskimos, you know. So the crowds loved it. And we became a mainstay of sort of the bar scene in New York when there was just music bars all over the place here, which kind of died out over the last, 30 years. Um, but there used to be just gigs I mean, there still are tons of gigs in New York, compared to most places. But if you could see what it was like back then, it was incredible how much stuff was going on, how many musicians were here just, vying for space or whatever. It was pretty intense. Um, but so we started playing, on the weekends, and then that came to and we got up to almost 5 days a week, I think, for a while, and we were just socking all the money away to make the first album. And so we did that for 3 years and just played as much as we could. We started getting calls to go to colleges and things like that, so we would try to make that happen. And yeah, and so we saved about 10 grand, I think. And because we just didn't get paid. Nobody got paid. We were so on the same page. We were so united at that time. It was really inspiring. It's really inspiring when you're young and you're with a group of like-minded people, and then you create something together, and then you go, wow, this is actually really special. This is amazing. Wow. And so we were all feeling that. And because it was really just the combination of people. It wasn't down to any one thing. I mean, Michael was an insanely creative person, the drummer, who passed a year ago. But he was sort of the point man in the beginning, bursting with ideas. He had a successful career in advertising ultimately. Um, but yeah, everybody contributed, and there was no ego. And that was the other thing. It was like if I brought in a song or someone, well, I wouldn't even dare bring in a song it took me a while to feel not the new guy. Also, because I was from Ohio, and these are mostly native New Yorkers or people from the East Coast and stuff. And even though both my parents are from the East Coast originally, I did grow up in Ohio. So um, it took it. I just kind of kept my mouth shut, and just observed, and tried to play my part, basically. And we had nothing written down. It was all learned by rote. You just made up your own part. And then I would just ask Al McCabe on sax, hey, is that okay? And he'd be like, yeah, that's good. He's like, all right, I got my part. Excellent. Um, and the whole thing was done like that. We never wrote down a note until it was time to make the next album, basically. Um,
So every part was just initially improvised, and if it was given the green go, you just went with it.
Basically, yeah. I mean, when I came in, they were putting the finishing touches on Bumblebee Tuna, on their arrangement of Bumblebee Tuna. But and Saba too was still in process. But but Doomsday was done and Eskimos was finished, and those things I just had to learn the part, learn the melody, you know, and then pick a note on the skanks. We never were scientific about it, like you take the third, you take the sixth. No, it's like we just Just play a note. If it sounds good, fine. And the reason we did that is because that's what the Skatalites appeared to us to be doing. You know, we were avid lovers of the Skatalites, and who were around. They lived in New York and they played a lot locally, and it was cheap to go see them. So we did often. And what we loved about them was that they had the sophistication of a jazz artist. Like Tommy McCook could play a very sophisticated jazz solo, but they weren't uptight. Everything was loose. It was like, uh, if there's a wrong note, hey, whatever. The feel is there. We're not worried about that. We're recording live here. So to for horn players in the 80s and 90s, like, you got to understand that was like the heavy rock era. Like, that was like heavy metal, hardcore, grunge. You know what I mean? Like, there was no room for horns really. And we felt it when we went to venues because we're on the rock circuit. Ultimately, ska bands are on the rock concert circuit, and we would go to these places and the sound men had no clue how to mix horns, and everything was so freaking loud. I can't even emphasize to younger players today how much louder the stages were back then. I mean, it was seen as a virtue. Like, if you could push it to the absolute limit, that was seen as a good thing, and and I had tinnitus for years after our initial run. Fortunately it subsided a bit, um, but it was loud, and they didn't really know how to mix horns. So it was a challenging environment in which to be a ska band, and we just kind of went out there and did our thing, and generally were positively received. Occasionally, people would take us the wrong way because of the image and would freak out on us, but that was definitely the exception. Most people really, I always say, like, out of 100 people, you're going to get at least 15 to 20 that are going to, like, check for us again. You know what I mean? And follow up. We're not for everybody. We're definitely a more of a connoisseur's ska band, you know. But it all comes from that original root of trying to sound like the Skatalites. In other words, to be sophisticated, but not uptight, not too perfect, not too, we're more perfect now where we're writing down our charts and we're playing these involved lines. This is what the band has kind of evolved more into. But in the beginning, we were like, we loved the looseness of ska and the fact that you could be yourself in that musically, in that setting, and not too loose. Like, you don't want the drummer slowing down, or going, or somebody playing out of tune. Like, not loose in that sense, but loose in the sense of, like, hey, if it's got a good rhythm, and the rhythm's happening and it feels good, and it's like just one note that's like rubbing another note, like, that's actually not bad. That actually can be good, because it adds a humanity to it, and a
and a
realness
little
to it.
bit of musical freedom.
And freedom. Yeah, that's what it's about, really. I mean,
Uh,
it's not a pop style, really. It's a real musical style. So
so the satanic theme was already thoroughly established when you had joined the band.
100%. Yes, that had all been worked out prior to me getting there. And I guess you may have read Mark Wasserman's book. Have you read that at
No.
all? Oh, you got to get that. I really owe a debt of gratitude to Mark because he told our story like just the facts, you know? And that's a good thing because we have a convoluted story and it's not easy to tell. And he did a great job. But a lot of that stuff's in there about the early origins of the band before I got there. Uh, those guys, Brian Martin, Michael Reich, Brendan Tween, those three, and then add Andre to that. Okay, that's the core right there. And they came up with the concept. I'm not going to referee who thought of the name or who thought, you know, of the concept first, because those guys will fight that out to the end of time or not. You know what I mean? So, I, but but the point is, it was always seen as a group concept that we were all in it together. We co-owned the first two records. We hung on to our own publishing. That was a cardinal rule, that we would not sell our publishing to an outside party. Um, And we've turned down more deals than most bands ever see for that reason, because we refuse to give up ownership for chump change, and no guarantees, So we've hung on to everything we've ever made, and one hopes it's accruing value, you know, but um but we could have been more famous for sure had I taken some of those deals, had we agreed to go with the Victory Records or something like that, or Tommy Boy Records or one of those. But it was, to us, the deal. We would read the contract, we would see the part where they were trying to take something for nothing, and then we would say, well, we're interested in this deal if you will change this paragraph to read as follows, or this, and they would either say, okay, we'll work with you on that. Here's our counter offer or whatever. Or they would say, oh, no, 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 this is our deal, and you either take it or leave it. And in that case, we would always leave it. So that's looking back with decades of hindsight. I mean, did we make the right call? I don't know. I mean, it's six of one, half a dozen of the other. You know what I mean? Like, I look at Tomas in Streetlight. He took the Victory deal, but he ended up having to sue the shit out of them, and it ended up with a big problem for years. So we avoided that. We had our own problems internally, of course, but we avoided getting entangled in anyone else's, crooked, you know, deal or whatever. Or I'm not saying they did a crooked deal. I have no idea about their deal, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't want to give away what we had really worked hard to create.
And
So
very few people make it out of them major label record deals unscathed. Like the only
yeah.
one I can really think of is like the Blue Meanies, how they signed a major label for Full Throttle, and then once the album came out, the label was like, eh, and then they kind of just
Oh,
walked
not
away
Full
from it.
Throttle, Post Wave, you mean?
Post Wave,
Yeah.
yes, Post Wave.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, they were our best buddies, of course, at the time. We toured with them a couple times, and we really had a great simpatico with them, because we have similar musical outlooks. And plus they're just such great, clever guys, and they're just great people. Um, so we watched that happen, and for us it was like, oh man, we kind of were like, oh man, they shouldn't have done that, because they had so much integrity, you know. But I understand. I mean, we were not offered that kind of deal. Had we been offered that, we would have had to consider it too. So I can't say for sure what we would have done, but I mean, I know that deal did break up the band, so on that level, it wasn't so great. You know, I don't mind that record. I actually still listen to that record, Post Wave. I still
Yeah,
pull it out, listen to it. Um, I love the Blue Meanies. They're one of my favorite bands ever.
me as well. Me as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. But yes, it's tough. I mean, I was talking about this with Jay Navarro from the Suicide Machines too, because they were signed to Hollywood Records, which is Disney, and it took them a while to get their rights back, and it took some effort. I think he told me they had to literally, like, Disney was so lazy about following up on anything, that they had to literally go there and actually physically find what they needed and stuff. Um, I'm not getting any details right on that, but I'm just saying it can get complicated, yes. I'm not saying that we did the better option. I really don't know. You know, I'd like to think so, but I'm not going to say that, because look where we are. We're struggling. We're just trying to keep it on the road and get our record out. We're just like a DIY band. Another DIY band. That happens to have a 35-year history. You know,
Of
so
35 years of awesome.
yeah. Thanks.
Uh, so let's get into the first album, God Bless Satan.
Sure.
1984. I fucking love this release. This is obviously how I discovered your band. Like,
Yes.
very
1994.
influential upon my teen years.
Yes. 94. I just was correcting the date.
Did
You
I
said
did I
84.
say 84?
Yeah,
I am sorry.
that's okay. I'm stuck in 1984, so it's fine.
Yeah, I kind of feel I kind of feel that.
Yeah, I think we all are actually. Now they mention
Oh, there's a few billionaires, you know.
it. Yeah. Yes. We've always been at war with Canada. You don't remember? It's always
Yeah,
been
yeah.
that way. Anyways, um, what were we talking about again?
Oh, first album. Tell me
Oh
about it.
yeah,
Let's discuss God Bless Satan.
sure. What would you like to know? Like
Uh
just the
well,
origins of it, or
not like okay, so that see this is where it's all up to you because like some
okay,
people like to get into detail about how the story behind how they got into it. Some people go into detail about different it's just whatever you feel. When
okay,
somebody brings up that album, what
yeah.
comes across your mind?
Oh, it was just a great time in life. Um, that was, as I said, like we'd been playing live a lot, and you know, and we knew we had to record. We knew we were overdue to record, and so we saved the money and we chose the studio based on that's where the Scofflaws recorded their album. Because we were also massive Scofflaws fans. Basically, the Scatolites and the Scofflaws were our gods, like in the early days of Mephiskapheles. And we would open for the Scofflaws all the time. We were one of their favorite opening bands, you know. And I became roommates with Buford, in fact, for 5 years, starting in '94. Um, so we shared, tips and info, and I watched the Scofflaws get their shit together and go on the road, and and go on tour, and that he saw us do the same thing. It was really cool. We had a nice roommate situation. We generally would have a third roommate. I'm still in the same apartment actually. And and Buford became my roommate for a second 5 year stint also in the 2000s. So he's like, I consider him family basically.
Wait. So you've been in the same apartment since '94? Is
Since
what you're
91. Well, since 94, yeah. But the building since 91, yeah. Yeah.
that blows my mind a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's pretty nuts. But part of that is because the band ran into so many problems, and I honestly couldn't move. I had to just kind of hunker down. I didn't really have options after the band got, sued, and my own finances went down the toilet, and I had to just get a job and hunker down, and then try to get a few gigs here and there to stay involved, you
And
know.
now I'm super curious.
Yeah.
So in the past 30 years, how much has your rent went up for the same
Well, I
apartment?
have what they call a rent stabilized lease. Okay, so there's in New York, you got three kinds of leases. You got your market rate lease, your rent stabilized lease, and then the cheapest, most desirable lease of all, the rent controlled lease. And the rent control program was, like discontinued decades ago. But if you're lucky enough to have inherited your grandmother's apartment or something like that, you could be paying $300 a month or whatever, because the rent control was like it never goes up, or it can only go up by like $1 or something ridiculous. And so they, obviously, big real estate being one of the big money making industries in New York City, they hate rent stabilization. They've been trying like hell to get rid of it in Albany, and they try to get as many people out of that system as they can, or as many apartments out of that system as they can, I should say. If your apartment hits a certain rent threshold, then if you leave, then it can go into the market rate system. It can come out of the rent stabilization system. But anyway, so I moved in this place in '94, and my rent was high for that time, but not that high. It's a pretty large place, actually. It's this whole story of how I even got in this place, which I'll tell you at another time because I don't want to get into that. But I lucked up, basically getting this place in the first place. And and then I've just steadily paid rent. I've been sued for eviction a couple of times during hard periods of life when I didn't have enough money, but I managed to, ultimately stave that off. I mean, the courts here tend to be very tenant friendly. So as long as you pay the money within the 90 days, then you're all right. So I was able to get out of that mess, but I didn't get the like critical momentum to like actually move to another place or something like that. I tried a couple times, but I don't think I'm going to stay here that much longer. You know what I mean? Because it's like when I live in the same spot from when I'm 21 to 85 or something. I don't know, man. It's not that nice. You know, I got rats, I got roaches. It's New York. So,
Oh, they got traps and poison for that. You're fine.
yeah, I need a cat, but then I travel too much. So, I really need a cat is what I need, but I'm just traveling too much to deal with it. So, um, so anyway, that's so God bless Satan. So we were playing live, saving money. We booked time and we got Victor Rice to manage the sessions because he was with the Scofflaws and he had produced the Scofflaws first album. So we said, all right, we'll get Victor. And Victor had played the first gig with Mephiskapheles on bass. He was actually the bass player on the very first Mephiskapheles gig ever. So he was a friend of the band. Um, and so we recorded everything. We just went in there at 9 in the morning and banged out like our live set, basically. And I don't remember that much about it other than it set the template for how we've recorded ever since, which is to have the horns in a booth, the vocals also in a booth, and then the guitar cabinet in a closet somewhere, and then the bass and drummer can look at each other and play live. We always record live for best results. Um, so we started doing that then. So we just played our live set, recorded it. It felt just like playing live, except it was 9 in the morning. And in the end, I guess we were there a couple, 2, 3 days, and we got a rough mix, and it wasn't that good. It was like, eh, you know, well, it was okay, but it wasn't like what we thought, what we'd heard in our heads, or the reaction that we were getting live. Um, so we just kind of, I don't really remember. I guess some time went by, and then a friend of mine from Cleveland, Bill McKinney, who now is the leader of the West Kensingtons band out of Philadelphia. He's just got a ska band called the West Kensingtons. Well, anyway, I went to high school with him. And so he had done a record. He's a guitar player. He had done a record with uh, a guy from Funkadelic, Michael Hampton. He had done a record, and they were produced by this guy, Bill Laswell, had produced the record. And it was, I think, um, it was called Slave Master, was the name of the band. Anyway, so Bill said, hey, Bill was a big Mephiskapheles fan, and we were good friends, and he was a big supporter of my musical ambitions, and I was a big supporter of his. And he said, well, why don't I give your demo to, or give your rough mixes to Bill Laswell's assistant, and maybe he'll listen to them, and maybe, you can get some tips, or maybe he'll want to produce you guys. And that's what happened. And it was just, again, very lucky. Bill Laswell heard us. He said, oh, I'll produce them for free. Uh, and he produced God Bless Satan for free, which means he mixed it along with Bob Musso, who's, produced all the Murphy's Law records, and he was Bill's engineer. So again, the strength of the music is what opened that door. And it's interesting because, again, Mark Wasserman's book, he interviewed Bill Laswell in the book. And he asked about Mephiskapheles and said, what, because we're really different from everything else in his discography. I mean, he's produced Motorhead, he's produced some rock albums, but most of his stuff is avant-garde, like John Zorn, noise jazz rock stuff. Very avant-garde. He also did some really cool dub mixes of Miles Davis and also Bob Marley stuff that are totally worth checking out. But we didn't really know about him. I mean, I'd seen his name because he was, on the scene. But and his one big hit that he produced Rocket by Herbie Hancock. So that was the one big chart hit that he'd had. And he also produced PIL's first album too, I believe. So he's like very heavy duty dude. And he agreed to do our thing. And so Wasserman interviewed him, and he said, "Yeah, I was in the habit of producing bands back then that I thought might not otherwise be able to get that level of production on their own." And he said, when I heard Mephiskapheles, the combination of the jazzy horns and the heavy bass put it right up my alley. You know, the heavy guitars and bass and the jazzy horns. He's like, this is what I was thinking about at the time I produced them. I was working on heavy bass stuff for dub reggae records, and then also doing these avant-garde horn records. So he was like, it was a natural for me to just, accept this project and take 2 days out of my life and do it. So we were just super lucky, to get that opportunity. And so then, so we had this killer mix, and Michael Reich, rest his soul, insisted that we spend top dollar to get Howie Weinberg to master it, because Howie Weinberg had mastered all Michael's favorite albums, and he's one of these top flight mastering engineers, who's on, back then probably a third of the top 40 probably he mastered, or something like that. So he's up there with like Bob Ludwig and people like that. These are like serious heavyweights of a past era now, but these were the people before digital, would have their own customized mastering room with perfect acoustics, a custom built analog, mastering setup, with all the bells and whistles. They could, they basically pull out any frequency they want. They can, boost this, lower that, whatever, anything to make it more attractive and appealing as a piece of recorded music. And so we spent $3,000 in 1994 to hire Howie Weinberg to master God Bless Satan. And honestly, it was worth it, because I mean, nowadays you just put it in the algorithm and push master, and then you go with that, put it on the internet, and you're done. But back then it was, we were like, okay, we started with this recording that's basically just a document of us playing live. We got Bill Laswell to mix it, and we just gave him a few production notes. Like I remember Michael saying, "Hard times, I want it to sound like a Gothic cathedral, sound, or the organ on Eskimo should sound like, the Phantom of the Opera, or something like that." So just these little tips, like Laswell and Musso ran with that and produced this classic that you wouldn't have thought it was a classic when you first heard the rough mixes. You just wouldn't have. You would have said, this is a competent ska band playing their set. Okay, it sounds good. But when Laswell got through with it, just the way he balanced everything, if you listen to that record, it is so skillfully mixed. It's like what he did with the upright bass sound, to create the foundation of the whole thing. And then like I love what he did with my sound. Like he actually made me sound like myself, how I actually sound, which is tough with the trombone. The trombone has so many overtones happening at once that it's hard to mix. And it's a lot of times guys will mix me and it just comes out sounding really rubbery and brittle, or like, you know what I mean? Like something is lost. But I loved what he did with my sound. And I was, we were all just so open, like just playing in the moment, even on the record, And I think that's why you feel that energy on that record, because we were not thinking about it at all. First of all, it was in the morning. We started the session in the morning. We were not morning people. Um, and yeah, it just magically all came together in those early days, honestly. But not without a ton of hard work and cooperation and teamwork, especially. But it did have that feeling of like it was easy, because everything just seemed to fall into place, and that we were the right band at the right time. Like the New York Times did a big feature on us, when they were talking about ska blowing up nationally. We were one of the bands that was selected, as the next big thing or whatever. And so it all just felt like we were at the right place at the right time, and somehow magically this group of very different people, very diverse group of personalities, like created this sound together. And so that's what the mission has been ever since, because we've had a ton of turnover, obviously, although we have now 4 original guys, which is pretty good. 4 out of 6, 4 out of 6 or 7 is not bad. We have Andre, myself, Bits on bass, and Wayne on drums, who arrived for the second album, Maximum Perversion. But we try to, the connecting thread to those early days is that we try to keep the same philosophy of music and the same openness and the same um like the same virtues, you know what I mean? Like we're not like even though we get like people we throw people off because we change our sound with every album. We change our approach a little bit with every album. But ultimately it's an evolution of the same approach, as we're looking at it, you know. So so God Bless Satan was the sort of the beginning of the run because I mean the demo really was the beginning, but God Bless Satan we fleshed out a couple new versions of stuff on the demo and then just recorded those 13 tunes, and then the Bumblebee song uh ended up with that wild long arrangement with the falsetto part in the middle and all that, which like as a matter of playing it live, we've since like shortened it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to make that album. It was really fun because I mean it was just a fun group. Like everybody was there to have fun. That was kind of the whole point. And we were being irreverent with the Satan thing, and that was at that time not any big deal. It was just funny. It was a way to get a rise out of people, or just I mean the Rastas would some of them took it very seriously and didn't like us. You know, they thought we were playing around with stuff we shouldn't play around with, I guess, or something. But I don't know. I used to worry about it a bit, and then I kind of stopped worrying about it because it's just silly. I mean, like, did the guy that wrote Faust, like Goethe, did he sit around worrying, oh my God, I wrote this book. It's no, it's a story. It's fun. It's like, it's characters. Like Satan is a character in the Bible, as a matter of fact, he's a Christian character, as a matter of fact, So I mean, it's really just been a lot of fun, and that it's regarded as something special is really makes us keep doing it. And so that album came out on Moon. That was a big debate because there's certainly people in the band that didn't want to always be the opening band for the Toasters. Uh, we were a New York band, they're a New York band. Um, we consider them the past, we're the present. Um, so that was tough. But the bottom line was that Bucket, Rob Hingley, was always fair with us. He was always straight up, and he generally would outbid the competition as well. So he's been one of our biggest supporters ever since the band started. And we did many a deal with Bucket, sitting at the telephone bar on Second Avenue, writing on a bar napkin or a coaster, as he broke down and many ska bands in New York have had the same experience, by the way. This is like a universal experience for ska bands in New York to sit down with Bucket at the telephone bar while he does the numbers on a coaster and shows you through his carefully constructed analog distribution network of the time, how much money you were going to get or how many copies he was going to ship to this distributor, that one. And he was just very upfront. And then he would send you the official paperwork and it would all match. So I had no reason to ever not work with him. Um, and we could get into the people that have been critical of him. And I've heard both sides of the story, and I tend to believe Bucket's side. That's just me. But, because I know him to be a straight up businessman, and I know other people to, take advantage of that because I'm the same way. So, in other words, I try to be honest, but then you find people who see that and they go, oh, well, that means you're not going to attack me if I do this. And that's just part of the business. It's tough business, even at this level. So
Word, word.
am I
Yeah,
giving you too much? Is this too much?
no, you're fine. You're fine. Uh, but yeah, let's move on to the next album. Fucking
Sure.
Maximum Perversion. Like right off the bat, that one, like, God Bless Satan had a lot of influence on me, but
Sure.
Maximum Perversion might be my favorite album.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of people say that now, and it's my favorite of our albums so far, I think. Although when this new one comes out, that's going to be because this new one we got that we recorded at Muscle Shoals, which is yet to come out, is like I think of it as Maximum Perversion 2 almost because it's along the same lines. It's
Oh,
like,
oh, now see, now you're building it up.
oh, I'm serious, man. I'm not kidding. It's like we really pushed it. We really pushed our limits on this one and in a musical sense. And it's really great. It's killing me that it's not out yet. Honestly, man. It's like it's driving me nuts. Anyways, back to Maximum Perversion. Yeah, that was a function of being on the road for 3 years after God Bless Satan, because God Bless Satan took off like a rocket, and then we had gigs galore for like years. But we were on the road and we realized, oh man, we got to put out a follow up, like it's getting late. And then so we, as we always do, just put out a general call for tunes. Whoever's got tunes, bring them in. And it ended up being the horn section bringing in the most tunes. Brendan, who had written a large portion of God Bless Satan, the guitar player, he brought in one song for Maximum Perversion, which was Turtle Soup, which is we still play. Um, but it ended up that's why it's such a horn centric album. Is basically we needed songs urgently to get started on making this new album. Otherwise, it was going to be even more late. And that's who brought in the songs, which is the horn players brought in our ideas. But every meth tune is hashed out in rehearsal. It's seldom that someone brings in something and then we play it down exactly as written or whatever. It's like it always is going to get messed with, and another um that's another aspect of the band that I've tried to preserve over the years is just that to have that openness to criticize each other's music and to say, well, that's a good tune, but it's not right for this band, or just, well, that's good, but what if we did this differently in this part or whatever, and to no matter who it's coming from or who's saying it to who, that it should never result in like an ego clash, really. You know, easier said than done. But in those earlier days, it just never did. So we've tried to continue that tradition of just being really open to we want the best result for everybody, not you know it's not about ego. It's not about individual ego. There's only one guy in the band that's essential, and that's Andre, the lead singer. We can do the gig absent any other member, so so anyway, so that album we got a little more involved with the writing, and there was more stuff written down, and recording wise it was we did it on our own dime again. And we started out in an interesting studio located above the Ed Sullivan Theater in Midtown, where they at that time they had the Dave Letterman show was happening at the Ed Sullivan, and the studio was a Japanese owned place, and their specialty was making karaoke soundtracks that would sound exactly like the original. So like they like for the audition, like we went there to check out the studio, and they played us like their version of I think it was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or something like that by the Beatles, and it was like pretty darn close. Like they got the tones and everything almost perfect. Um, so we just went there because they offered us a good rate, and it was like the engineer was really good, and so we started recording there. We recorded about half the album there at Daiichi Kocho, and then we got an offer from a guy named Alex Haas, who is now, I believe, out of music, but at that time he was the engineer for Daniel Lanois and had recorded like Bob Dylan's comeback album and like Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton. He was the engineer for that. And anyway, but he had access to Avatar Studios, which is like, I don't know if it's still around. I think they might have closed, but it was like the premier studio in New York. It was uh, the former power station. It used to be known as the Power Station in the 70s. Um, anyway, absolutely wonderful, great studio, huge, giant live room, like massive plate reverbs, like hanging in an elevator shaft in this giant Manhattan building. I mean, like they really could get amazing sounds out of this place. And many hit records have been made there, like Too Many to Count. And all the great jazz artists wanted to record there if they weren't recording at Rudy Van Gelder's. Um, so we took the opportunity to get, he gave us a great deal, and he said, bring the project over here and we'll finish it over at Avatar. I said, all right. So we did that. That really pissed off the people at Daiichi Kosho that we left in the middle of the project, but we paid our bill. So it was, it's just business. And we finished the record with Alex Haas. And this is around the time we were shopping for a bunch of deals. And again, Bucket just gave us a better deal. Moon Records was just the better deal. Compare. This is around the time where I was talking about we were approached by Victory, and every record we made, we were approached by them or labels like that. But in the end, Bucket gave us more cash up front, and gave us a video budget, and we knew that his distribution would get the record into the hands of the people we needed to get it into. Now, was Bucket happy with that deal in hindsight? Maybe not, because I mean, I've vlogged like thousands of miles on the road with Bucket as a member of the Toasters, and we've talked about every aspect of the years 1991 to 1999. And I mean, everybody thought that the follow-up to God Bless Satan was going to be just as big as God Bless Satan, and that it was going to be along the same lines. It was going to be a fun party album with sing-alongs and a goofy take on going to hell, But then we came out with this crazy-ass jazz album, avant-garde rock jazz thing. And it was not really received that well. It took 20 years, honestly, for people to say, you know what, this record's a classic, actually. Like, it took 20 years. No joke. Like major critics who loved God Bless Satan, right? And were saying, oh, these guys are the best, most fun band to come along since I don't know when. They looked at Maximum Version and said, well, these guys took a really weird turn into some dark jazz stuff. Like, I don't know about them, anymore, So that was kind of the reaction. But like, we were always a live band first and foremost, and that never changed. And we just kept rocking it on stage, and the people kept buying tickets and buying our merch. So, and then 20 years later, everyone says it's a great album. So
it was a great album back then.
Thank you.
It's always been a great album.
Thanks. So that was kind of produced by, I think it's credited to produced by Mephiskapheles and Alex Haas, because we were basically in the studio the whole time, like, giving our input. He never really tried to override us or overrule us or anything like that. So yeah, that was a great experience also. And as I said, we made a video. Bucket gave us a ridiculously large video budget. I mean, I don't even want to say how much money it was, because it's so funny in the context of today's, today's musical world. But it was a lot of money, and we made this video at a sound stage with a dolly track for the camera, and dancing girls dressed up in devil suits, and like professionally made sets, with like the logo and stuff. And we shot this video, and man, I had to recut that video like 4 times because we just didn't have enough footage at the end of the day. And it was like trying to stretch it into a proper video. And so we made the video, and of course the video we put out for the first album, for Doomsday, got all kinds of play on MTV. It was actually in rotation 2 separate times, years apart, on MTV, and it was featured on The Real World and Spring Break, and like, they jumped all over it. This one never got played on MTV. I don't think it even got played on MTV2. And Much Music in Canada put it on their list of the 50 worst videos of the year, which is better than nothing. It's better if they don't put you on any list at all. But, it was kind of funny. And so, but we just, again, this was the peak of our touring years. So we were on the road 140 or more nights a year. So we didn't really have time to worry about it. We just, kept playing, and
push your heads above your graves, look down and find the sea. Thank you, Lord, for the gifts you gave, the hatred and the greed. Ain't it funny who denies me what your blood so supplies me? We're the reapers of the demon. We are reapers of
And then the problems began with the personnel because we'd been for 10 years or almost 10 years. Well, I guess what was that? Like about 7 years we've been going. And um and nobody had made more than like 9, 10 grand a year off the band, you know? I mean, we ran it as a cooperative. We divided everything up equally, you know, and although guys hung on to their own publishing. Uh so people started to flake. People started to get married. They started to have job, we started to worry like maybe I should hang on to this job after all, that I've been jerking my boss around for 3 years while I'm going off on tour. Maybe it's time for that to end, and stuff like that. So I remember we played the New England Ska Festival in August of '98. And on the ride back, a bunch of guys said, I can't do this anymore. And just because it had been a lot of years and not a lot of money, and they wanted to move on with their lives. They're not as crazy as me and Andre, I guess, or I don't know. And so at that point, Andre and I were like, Bits went back to school. Wayne got a gig on Broadway playing with the Lion King or something, and so he had to do that, of course. So we had a bunch of sub drummers for a while. It became very onerous, to keep the band going, even though we were still super popular and there was no shortage of gigs or anything. But it was like we were losing money. We hadn't started to lose money yet, but it was entering that period where things started to go wrong, basically after a very charmed first few years of the band. So we came back from New England Ska Fest. Few guys said, okay, that's it. I got to take a break or whatever. And so then we got other people to play, and that's the band that became the Mighty Whitey band. And that is the lead up to that is what really led to all the problems. And I don't know how much I want to go into that really, but it was like, we basically just as everybody was flaking, this often happens in bands. Just as everybody was getting, it's like being a band leader is like, you wish you could be a dictator sometimes and just tell people what to do and that they would just do it. But that's just not how it works. And we started as a pure democracy too. So it was like, we had to listen to everybody. And if guys were having a problem, we definitely took it seriously and listened to them and tried to solve it and stuff like that. But ultimately, people reach a point in bands where it's just too much commitment if they have other stuff going on, and then they just have to move on, especially if they've devoted a lot of time already to it and it hasn't really paid off. A lot of people just kind of go like, okay, well, I did that. Let me move on. So we got replacement people, and that's what led to the problem, because then one of the people that we replaced it wasn't necessarily voluntary for him, Most of the guys had quit, but then we were like, well, there's still another complaining guy left. So, and so we were trying to make a fresh start for the next record. And and naively, I would say in hindsight, did not properly check with a lawyer, did not do our due diligence, and ultimately triggered a lawsuit against the band that took the band down. So I did plenty of soul searching in the aftermath of that. And I take my share of responsibility for that, but that was the atmosphere leading to Mighty Whitey. Just as people were flaking and people were becoming disgruntled because we were working so hard but not really getting paid enough. Right at that time was when the real big offers started to come in, of course, And I was trying to tell them, guys, hang on, we're almost at the mountaintop. We're almost there. But you really can't tell that to somebody who's getting an earful from their wife over here, from their boss over here, But in fact, it was true. Like those offers were coming in. And so,
My God has left his claws for a job with more security. Savior, no, he doesn't want to be. Strip clubs are what he wants to see. Forget the sins of me.
So for the last album, for Mighty Whitey, the last album we did before the current one in Muscle Shoals that hasn't come out yet, um, we well, you haven't asked about that one yet, but
Well, we can segue. We're segueing into it right now.
okay. Well, anyhow, so that was the atmosphere. It was a very jumbled, chaotic atmosphere leading into that record. And Andre and I kind of knew that the thing was going down in flames a bit, but we said, it's better to have 3 records out and then fold up the band if we have to, than 2. It just leaves a better mark. I mean, I think I was thinking about like bands like the Police or even the Sex Pistols. They made 1 record. Well, I mean, we could have been the Sex Pistols, made God Bless Satan, called it a day. You know what I mean? And and based everything off of that, right? And I mean but that's not Mephiskapheles. That's not the original spirit of Mephiskapheles, and that's not what we want to turn into, you know? Like, but we could have done that, of course. Um, so 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 we're getting ready to we're starting to have rehearsals. We're starting to get music together for this next album. We've got some good musicians recruited. We got Bill McKinney on guitar. We got Dave Hahn on guitar. These guys are both master guitar players. We decided that if Brendan was going to leave, he was such a big part of the band. He was the second singer. He was the singer on Saba. And we decided if we were going to lose our guitar player, we weren't going to replace him with just one other guy where there would be the audience would be able to make a direct comparison. Well, this guy's not as good as that guy was. Or as it was, we had audience members for years going, "Where's Brendog? We want Brendog." I mean, he was very popular, and I pleaded with him not to quit the band a couple of times. But it was the same thing. He just had pressures from his family, from his wife, from work. It just became too much, and I totally understand that, So, but we didn't want to replace him with just one other guy, where then people would compare them with Brendog, and then do that whole thing. So we got 2 guitar players. We decided to go in a heavy metal direction for 1 record, and we got 2 shredders on guitar. And Wayne came back and made the album, even though he wasn't really touring with us at the time. But he came back and made the album. And that was another great experience recording that one. But that was our one and only actual real record deal, where we signed a deal with a real company to, because with Moon, not that Moon's not a real company, but those were lease deals. We would lease the master to them for like a year or 2 years and then get it back. This was the first one where they gave us money up front to record. They would own it, and sell it for us and give us tour support and put us on the road. We had a great lawyer, great accountant. We were really, really set up at that point in our career. We'd done all the hard work already, and now here came a really favorable deal. We got a lawyer to make it even more favorable, and it really looked like we were poised for greater popularity, honestly. It debuted when Mighty Whitey came out. I believe it debuted at 199 on the top 200 hard rock albums or some shit. But so there was the label wanted to make us, we were known as a touring juggernaut, and they wanted to make us a chart band, as crazy as that sounds, because we really didn't, even in the recording of that record, really do anything that they wanted us to do. I think we strategically, when the producer said, "Oh, I want to do this little effect," we said, "Okay," because we're like, well, if we give him this, then we can deny him all this other shit, But we tried to keep the creative control, even though we were in a big commercial deal. So anyway, everything went great with the recording, and it was a great experience. The band we'd put together was killer. We had for a while Mike McDermott on drums, who's now with Joan Jett, and used to be with Skinnerbox. And everything was great, but then this lawsuit was there. It had hit in November '98, and Mighty Whitey came out in '99. So it came out while we were being sued, and it was for millions. It was $25 million suit, which is absurd because we didn't make anything. off that record. I mean, we made enough money to pay our musicians to rehearse and to pay them for the session and to pay ourselves for the session. But there was, the $100,000 advance was only on paper. We saw 25,000 of it, and the rest of it went to the studio in like a sweetheart deal, like a backdoor deal. So, so for this guy to sue us for 25 million is like absurd. There's no way we've never grossed anywhere near even a half million, ever. So, it screwed everything up. The label stopped taking our calls. They canceled our tour support. We had tour support $5,000 per tour to get a tour bus and do it right. And all that went down the drain. And it just killed me because I had been the one to put the deal together. And after shopping through, winnowing through all these other deals and deciding this is the one, and then getting the lawyer to really optimize the contract and everything was great. But we made a critical mistake. We did not look before we leapt when it came to dealing with a certain member. And so he used his position and New York State partnership law, because we had naively created the band as a partnership, which you should never do, kids. Always do an LLC or a corporation, not a partnership. But because with partnerships, you see, all decisions have to be unanimous. And therefore, that makes doing anything different really hard. And so it was not a normal situation where you just say, hey, look, man, I think we've come to the end of our road. Let's part ways. We'll, like, what do you want? It wasn't like that. He absolutely decided that if he's not a part of the band, then there's going to be no band. So he sued us, sued the record company. Everything went to hell. We then tried to keep touring through it, but it was insurmountable. There was too much debt. The hired musicians that we were using, needed to get paid a certain amount. I didn't have any real support staff within the band. Our road manager had bailed, so I was doing all the road managing work as well, and just losing my mind. It was just too much. And so Andre and I made the tough decision in the summer of 2001 to shut it down, and that's something I've come to regret, that we did that, and that we didn't just gamble one more time, and just go on tour one more time, instead of shutting it down. Because what ended up happening was, we missed the boat on the whole Warped Tour thing in the 2000s, which we would have certainly been part of otherwise. And all the bands that that we grew up touring with, like Mustard Plug, Slackers, Boss Tones, they all just surpassed us, in the end. So we lost 11 years to that lawsuit, where we couldn't have a band, and I could barely work as a musician other than as an anonymous side person to other people. So it had damaging effects to everybody. And ultimately we lost a lot of money and a lot of connections that way. So it was a massive triumph when we were able to get rid of that lawsuit and put the band back together. It represented a real culmination of believing in ourselves and not giving up.
Hoping for miracles, so you gorge yourselves on weeds. If their cup will bleed, if their cup will bleed, if their cup will bleed, who do you?
While you guys were broken up, I come across 2 demos by 2 bands, and I don't know if you were a part of either one of these projects. One of them was called
Okay.
Skullaball,
Yeah, I was in Skullaball.
and the other one was Burning Guitars.
Burn Guitars.
Burn
I was
Guitars.
not in Burn Guitars.
No, no.
I was in Skullaball. Skullaball was a spin-off that we had while the main band was out of commission. And it was Andre on vocals, Bill McKinney and myself on guitar, and Mike Bitts on bass, Giuliano Seben on drums. He was the drummer for Step Too Far and Scum City. Those are hardcore bands in New York. Um, and I don't know, we just, yeah, that was a blast. It didn't really last long, but I think I did maybe 10 gigs with them. And they were all just super fun. And I love playing guitar. I don't get a chance to do it much. I'm really like a hobby guitar player kind of, but I played since I'm 11 and I love it. I just don't get much opportunity. Um, but yeah, it was fun. Unfortunately, because I was dealing with so many issues with wrapping up the band, it was just a mess, honestly. In fact, I even did a tour with the Slackers as a sub for 2 weeks, and they offered me the gig permanently, and I turned them down because I was like, I can't leave, I can't just leave this all in Andre's hands, like this huge mess. Um, which then when I'm working for $9 an hour at a call center, I was like, God, I could be in Japan with the Slackers right now. I must be the biggest idiot. But it just wouldn't have been right. I couldn't have. I mean, a lot of musicians would do that. I'm not disparaging it. It's not me. Uh, there's plenty of musicians who would just, this is falling apart. Let me jump to the next thing. Um, but since I felt responsible. I was managing it. So at the time that it fell apart, so I felt very responsible to take care of everybody and make sure everyone, make sure the music didn't get stolen by anybody, and just to basically take care of the situation that I'd helped create. So I turned down the Slackers, and later was like, did I do the right thing? But I'm still pretty sure I did the right thing, because obviously I did the right thing, because they got Glenn Pine, and he's a core essential member of the Slackers now. So, they might not have got him if I'd been, in the way for a few months or a year or whatever. So, I think it all worked out.
You're in such a sorry state. Keep that fucking shit off my plate. Who are you to dictate over the color of skin? Dang that you wipe that slate, but I guess that is your fate. The horse has already left the gate. You will never win.
Yeah. So Burn Guitars, that was a project of Andre. Andre's a bass player. Actually, Andre's actually a really good bass player. He taught himself to play bass over the years, and he's really good. And he writes songs on bass too, and brings them in on bass now. So he was playing bass and singing. Bitts was on bass. Dan Jesselson was on bass, he's the bass player on Mighty Whitey. And then they also had Scott from No Redeeming Social Value also on bass. We were doing a lot of shows with No Redeeming around 99. We did a whole tour with them. Great hardcore band, classic New York hardcore band, awesome. And so the whole joke was Burn Guitars. There's no guitars. It's all bass. It's all bass players. So they're cool. I went to see a bunch of their shows. They were great. And Andre also joined another band during that time called Brother Earth. So he was lead singer in this group called Brother Earth, and bass player in a band called Brother Earth. They used to play at autos and stuff. And for my part, during the dark years, I ended up joining the band I got a night shift job, so that kind of screwed up my gig schedule. I was on the night shift 2007 or 2008 to 2018. I was proofreader on the night shift in Midtown. And so I didn't have a lot. I couldn't be a freelance guy just taking gigs. It was impossible. But I did join the band of Danny Aiello, the movie actor. He had a band. So I played in his band because I knew the drummer from a previous group I was in. And that was basically my only gig during those years after Skullaball broke up. And I played jazz gigs in my neighborhood too, in the East Village. For years, not recently, but for like 11 years, I had a gig in a cafe on 9th Street and Avenue A every weekend. And so that was mostly just training, just learning to play tunes and, improvise. But I couldn't really do much. During the time I was being sued, or when I was on the night shift, I was kind of very limited in what I could do. musically. So, but the night shift job was important because it got me out of the hole that had been created by the first round of Mephiskapheles, and then gave me money to start seeding the next round of Mephiskapheles. I was able to put some money into it to get it rolling because I actually had a decent income for once. So I it was just Andre and I had the whole time that it was shut down. Andre used to live in this neighborhood too for many years. He just left almost 10 years ago now, but he was here for years and years. One of the great moments I've had was when we did our second gig back. Our first gig back was on, well, let me go back. First, there was a reunion involving old Mephiskapheles members. I don't know if you've heard about that. There's a little bit of it on YouTube. But in late 2012, we had a reunion with the original horn section, with Brendan, with Michael. And we did a one-off kind of unplugged gig. And that was important because that's actually what led to the lawsuit being dropped. We couldn't do the gig without the lawsuit first being out of the way. And so we were able to get that removed. And then we did that gig. And then Andre he no-showed on the gig. He was supposed to be there. He didn't show up. He showed up at the end and just patted everybody on the back and said, "Great gig." But we decided after that we would just bring back the band that we'd had previously. I mean, there was no thought of reuniting the original Mephiskapheles. That was simply not going to happen. Guys were just off in their own different lives. This was like a one-off. But we decided that we would just pull the Mighty Whitey band back together and just see if it could work. And we did that. And so we did a gig on the boat cruising around Manhattan, the booze cruise. That was our first gig back. Inspector 7 opened, I believe. And that was right before a hurricane, as I remember, because the sky was really like green, it's like turning funny colors. But then the first gig we did on dry land was at the Mercury Lounge. And I'll always remember that because somebody, when we first appeared on stage, yelled out from the audience, "Thank you, Greg." and I mean, that means a lot to me because I put it's just somebody's yelling something in the club, but I mean, it meant a lot because I've put everything into this band that I've got, and I don't get paid to manage it, and I never have. And the fact that it means something to the fans actually is, we've always said since the very beginning, that's why we're doing this. Because they're telling us that it's special, and it helps them. It helps our fans, live their lives, to have our music as part of their lives. And so it was really, really, really gratifying to be able to come back and play these songs again. And we're not trying to recreate the past in any way. We're just taking it forward as if those 11 years didn't happen. And that's how it felt, honestly, when we came back, because immediately the phone started ringing. Immediately we had offers, and everybody welcomed us back to the scene. And then when we finally got on the road and went out west, then, like I said, people were coming out, had been waiting 20 years. They brought their kids. And we just realized, we just knew we were back. And so that we again experienced a years-long period of just very smooth sailing and just everything kind of going our way. And then of course, like with anything, eventually you got a few problems here and there. But all in all, it's gone great. So
Satan stole my weed. Guess he wanted to get me high. Satan stole my weed. Motherfucker has gotta die. Satan stole my weed. Guess he wanted to get me high. Satan stole my
fucking awesome. Awesome. So tell me about the first first EP that you recorded when you returned back.
Okay.
Do you call it the Mephiskapheles EP, or do you spit out one zero
No,
0011
I
0?
mean yeah. I mean we were working with our old road manager, our homegrown road manager, William Wilkie. He's a guy he now works for Pearl Jam, but he's worked for the Bosstones for a long time, and he's just a lifer as like a roadie kind of guy that gets stuff like a fixer, gets stuff done, merch manager, truck driver, whatever you need done. Michael Reich picked him out of high school. He was a fan that would come to our show. He always wore a little rude boy suit. And Michael said, that guy, I think we could get him to work for us, And he became our merch guy and ultimately our driver, which was funny because he drove us for years until finally we got pulled over one day and we found out he had no license. But I mean, that's how I became manager too, is I didn't ask to be manager. Michael was the manager. It fell to me because I was the only one who had a valid license and credit card. So that put me in that position.
Look at
And
you
then,
being a responsible adult. You're in
dude,
charge.
after the first time, I said never again. But here I am. Anyway, um, so yeah, that record. So William was like, "You guys should put out a record. It should be self-titled, and I'll bankroll it. I'll executive produce." And um, and so we did, and we recorded it at Studio Chill, which is a room in the music building on 8th Avenue in Manhattan. That's a classic space in Manhattan. Long may it stand. It's just a high-rise building full of music studios, basically, and mostly very DIY type studios. Um, and we've been rehearsing there since Mighty Whitey, all the rehearsals happened there, but it's a legendary spot. Like Jaco Pastorius used to hang out there. Like every musician in New York has gone through there at some point. Um, anyways, why was I saying that? Uh, so we recorded in Studio Chill, which is in that building, and so it was pretty much Studio Chill is just like a one room studio. So we like I said earlier, we really prefer to record live. Just how we perform the same way, just record live, make it so that the sounds are isolated, then you can go back and fix things, redo solos and stuff like that, but you still maintain the live feel. With Mighty Whitey, that was the first time we did it all separately tracked. Only the bass and drums played together and everything else was tracked separately. I mean, I guess the horn section played together. So we did a similar approach with whether you want to call it self-titled or Mephiskapheles, or as I've taken to calling it, the Satan Stole My Weed EP. That one we kind of just did it in pieces, basically. Because we only had one room to work with. I guess there's a small booth, but it's only small for like 2 horn players, maybe at most. But that was good. The mix took a while because there had been a problem with one of the microphones, which needed to be addressed. We ended up calling in consultants on the mix to help with it and stuff. But in the end, I think it held up really well. Gabe Kirchheimer mixed it for us. He's the proprietor of Studio Chill. And we've known him forever. He's actually been our drum sub on a few occasions going back to the 90s. And then we had it mastered by Stephen Egerton of the Descendants at the Blasting Room. So, and that again was on William's recommendation. He had worked a lot with the Descendants and NoFX. He's in that, NoFX's reality show where they tour all over the world. Like he's in that because he was their roadie at that time.
Backstage passport.
Yeah. Yeah. it's quite a show, quite an epic program. Um, but anyway, William was kind of the mastermind of that record, and he I don't know, he put it out for us actually on our own imprint. So um, I think it came out well. I think the mastering job was great, and uh, Gabe really worked hard on the mix, to fix all the issues, and I just think it came out really well. The There's one song on there that's not a ska song, "Snakes in the Garden." Um, Mike Bitts hates that song. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's not a ska song at all. There's no reggae to it or anything. Um, but that one is the only one where we use the original vocal that Andre did live while we were rocking out just in one room. So you can kind of hear that. He tried to do another one and he'd never really top that one. So we just kept it, you know. So, but we also had contributions from some incredible jazz musicians on that record. And trumpet, we had James K. Smith, who's with the Scatolites now. He's just a stunning trumpet player. We have a feature for him on there called "Let Them Come," which is almost like a rumba kind of vibe. And man, he just plays the hell out of it. And we also had contribution from the late Ron Sutton, who's a jazz legend out of DC, um, who who did some gigs with us as a sub, and he passed away unfortunately a couple of years ago. Um, but I I wish I had a version on there with him taking a solo. There is an alternate version with Ron Sutton Jr. taking a solo on a Mephiskapheles tune, but that's going to have to wait for the box set, I guess, or something. So, but it's interesting that the overlap between Meth and the jazz scene in New York is interesting because we're not of the jazz scene. We don't play in jazz clubs. We don't. The one time we did play in a jazz club, there was a riot. Uh, we played the West End back in '96 or 90, no, '93, and the skinheads went ballistic, and it was not good. Um, but we've had plenty of jazz musicians come through the band, and we have stellar jazz musicians come through the band, um, because often they're curious about, like, wow, I can play 12 solos a night. The audience is actually listening and dancing and moving around, and the tunes are hip. I'll do this for a year, or 2 years, 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, so that's gratifying too, just to be somebody that's helped people onto their way to greatness, you know. So that's become a part as we get older, and we're all in our 50s now, other than the youth movement in the band, which are in their 30s, which I'll get to that in a second. We realize our position here. We're part of the fabric of this whole scene, and not just the ska scene, but the whole music scene. So now if only anyone else would notice that'd be fantastic. But at least we're aware of it. So, but a lot of people have heard of us. A lot of people have not actually heard us. So that's a project.
Innocent, for you they will wait. The innocent, your soul they will break. Those in power lie, staring in your face, counting on your ignorance, wrapping you up in faith.
So yeah, that was a great EP, and your follow-up, "Never Born Again," was fucking great as well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, that one doesn't get a lot of
A little
love.
shorter, but it was fucking still great.
Again, we felt like we needed to put something out. We weren't ready to make a full album, but we did have some great music. We did have a good band, a good lineup. So it made sense. That one was completely produced in-house. That was done at Mike Bitz's house in the Bronx, where we ran cables all over his house and just had people in different rooms of the house. And I think it came out okay. I think we could have invested in better equipment at the outset, probably. sometimes I listen to it. I kind of want to remix it or just futz with it a bit, mess with the audio a little bit more. But but I mean the songs are good, and I mean the videos too. Like the video that we did for what do you call it? Oh, what's the name of that song? What's the first uh oh my God, I'm forgetting my own song. Da, 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 that one. Da, 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 da. Oh, da, 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 da. Andre and his titles that don't resemble the lyrics. Anyway, um, what was I saying? That yeah, that tune. We made a video for that, which I think is pretty good. Um, with a lot of footage of us playing at Sony Hall in Manhattan. But yeah, that record, I don't know. We just kind of had to get something out, so we did it. And and then there's bonus tracks on the vinyl version of that too, which are like basically demo versions of a couple of same songs. But but that's nothing compared to this new album that's not yet out.
Well,
Neverborn Again is good, but this album is like incredible. So I just, eventually you're going to hear it.
yeah. So you have this new album. It's all
Yes.
you're already recorded.
I'm not making it up. No, right? It's not a figment of my imagination. I didn't dream that I made the latest Mephiskapheles album, the first one in 25 years. No, no, it exists. We went to Muscle Shoals studio in the middle of a tour. We had a southern tour already booked. We've been this in the new era of Mephiskapheles. The South has become one of our mainstays, strangely enough. We go there more often than other parts of the country. Probably the Midwest and the South is where we go the most. Partly because it's accessible from where we are, but we have a lot of fans there, basically. Um, but so we had this tour booked down south, and that we were supposed to do 3 dates with Stuck Lucky out of New Orleans, and we had met them on a previous gig, and we liked them. They reminded me of the Blue Meanies, and so we had 3 gigs with them. They pulled out of those gigs, and the gigs fell through. And that was like 2-3 weeks before the tour. So we were faced with an option, and we were like, well, we could get some pickup gigs, get some door deals, because they were Stuck Lucky gigs that we were on, and the gigs went away. So, or we could go to Muscle Shoals, which is on the way, because we were going between Kentucky and Texas, and Muscle Shoals is Alabama, so not too far out of the way. So I had been to Muscle Shoals as a tourist recently. I have a buddy living in Huntsville, and he was kind of isolated down there and asking me to come visit him. And I said, okay, I will. And so I went down there, and he had arranged for us to go on tours of Muscle Shoals and Fame Studios. And we went to Muscle Shoals first. And as soon as I walked in the room, I was hit with a vision of Meth recording there, because it was the perfect layout. It was exactly what we need. It's a small room, but there's 3 booths, so plenty of isolation and great sight lines. You can see everybody. And then, let alone the fact that it's Muscle Shoals, which is a magical spot. It's has a vibe. It has a atmosphere. It has a sonic atmosphere. And even though it's not, it was dormant for a number of years and only recently brought back as an active studio, but it's miraculous. I recommend anybody who's traveling down there to visit Muscle Shoals Studio. It's totally worth it. It's up there with Stax and Fame and Sun Studios. It's totally worth it. It's just a miracle that they were able to retain all the furniture in the place, all the original furniture, got preserved, they were able to repurchase the original piano that they had, which is the one that Skinner played on, and Bob Seger, old time rock and roll, is that piano. It's a very distinct sounding piano, this Yamaha Baby Grand that they had there. And all this was made possible, in fact, by a grant of $1 million from Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre and Beats Headphones sent them a letter and said, the name of your studio is on all my favorite classic albums from the 70s and 80s, and 60s. So like, I want to reopen the studio. And they gave him $1 million and they reopened it. So it's a museum most of the time with tours, and it's like it's like a nonprofit owned by the state of Alabama, partially, I think. And but they still take bookings. So I was on a tour and I was there and I was looking at this and I was just like, wow, this is awesome. And then I asked the tour guide, so what does it take to book this place? And they were just like, well, just call the studio manager. So I called him and or called her and I said, I'm going to be in, my band's coming through the area. We're we're a very respected New York band and we'd love to record there. I didn't talk about Satan or God Bless Satan or Mephiskapheles or, it's the Bible Belt. I know that they're pretty hip at Muscle Shoals. I mean, they've recorded a lot of really great hip music, but you never know, so I left that part out when I was booking it. And I just booked it under my own name. And I just said, I'm bringing in a group of crack New York musicians and we're going to make an album. We're ready to go. All the music's ready. Here's some demos you can listen to, and they said, send us $500 and you're booked. So, so I sent them $500 and we went there and on tour and we were there for 3 days, long days. And they had a wonderful engineer named Chase Brandon, a young guy who had a ton of reverence and respect for the music, and we cut the album in just like we did God Bless Satan. It was just like the same experience. We just went in there knowing what we wanted to do and did it. And the difference being that God Bless Satan, most of those songs we had been playing for years in clubs and bars, but this time some of these songs we weren't quite even ready to record them. We thought some we'd been already playing for years and just not recorded yet. Others we were like, we're not really ready. But this was the opportunity of a lifetime. So we got ready, real fast. And this is where the youth movement in the band comes in, because I'm joined right now in the horn section, by two phenomenal musicians. Eric Molina on tenor, who's Mr. Ska. He plays with everybody, and but I'm very happy that he gives us priority, and I just love the guy. I just think he's great. But anyway, he's just, and as an old guy, and he's 25 years younger than me, it's like I'm getting perspective on the business and stuff that I just would not be able to get on my own, So, and then on alto we had Greg Lapine, and Greg is absolutely a phenom who's tearing up New York City right now. He did 5 years with us, getting in our jalopy of a school bus and going to gigs, and then finally said to me, look, Greg, I got some other gigs I got to do, and this has been fun, but let me know when the business is a little more together. And I knew exactly what he was talking about, of course, and I said, okay. So he's still involved, and he's in the movie, he's in the documentary about the Muscle Shoals record. So he's still in the circle, he's still in the family. And I've been using another guy named Nigel Innes, who's another just rising jazz star here in New York, who loves our band and loves the music, and he and Andre have both have background in Trinidad, so they're they vibe on that level too. And then it's anyway, it's just a privilege to work with these young musicians who are so great, and it makes me have to play better, and I learn from them and they're learning from me. I try to give them advice and not be too discouraging. It's like Eric is a aspiring and actually a rising band leader himself with his own really excellent group. You should have Eric on, honestly. Um, his group Los Mal Hablados out of Portland, Oregon, which is it's a Spanish speaking ska core band, and they're phenomenal. I actually subbed with them on a couple gigs out in Portland with Eric, and he's got that scene in the palm of his hand. I mean, he's
And you
doing
say
it right.
he's out of Portland?
Yeah, he's originally out of Washington State and has wound up in Portland. Um, Worked for the Israelites for a while as their manager also. I think he's moved on from that. Um, but he's just a highly capable dude and great player also. Um, and then Lapine also is just he's just a monster player, you know. Um, so and Nigel too. I mean it's great. It's great to be able to play with these guys. And it's great that they love the music too. You know, I really would like to see this record come out and the movie about the record to come out and get some proper distribution, some proper promotion, especially, and just to widen the audience a bit so that not just so the band can survive, not just so that I can live a little better, but like to spread it around to these other musicians, because that's what this band has always been about. This is a musicians band that takes care of other musicians, that cares about musicians, that cares about musicians' issues. And, you know, we're not out there just to be popular or just to, um, I don't know. We look at it as, you know, ska is really been watered down in terms of the concept of what ska is. Ska really comes from the streets and it comes from people who really cared about something, you know? And it kind of sucks to see it get cheapened like it has. But for our part, we're not the most successful. We're definitely not the richest. But we try to keep it real, man. We really do. Even though we blend ska with all kinds of other stuff, and we occasionally will do a song that's not ska at all. Um, our inspiration definitely comes from the Scatolites, and it definitely comes from that whole reggae ska movement of people just, you know, getting together and creating something new that hasn't been heard before, you know. And that's a New York thing too. Most New York musicians, if they're worth their salt, are trying to do something new, not just trying to sound like their hero or sound like somebody else or duplicate someone else's success, you know. So we're kind of, you know, we're a very odd bird, really, and we've yet to be really discovered again. We were discovered the first time around in the '90s for sure, but you know, these days it's gratifying to be written up in history books for sure, but it would be nice to also be written up in the newspaper or in the, you know, in the music press would be great, you know. But we don't have a press agent. We don't have anything. We got me, we got Bits, we got Andre, you know. So we do our best.
Word.
Let's go! Squeeze! Only you are death! You treat to death! Yet so welcome to bring your faith! Even you are forced!
Yeah. Off chance is Necromantical Scream's gonna be on the new one. That was an old
No,
one.
but I love that record, and we need to release that properly. And that was Kerrang magazine cited that as one of the best metal mergers with some other style that there is. Um, yeah, that was fun. That was for just like a compilation track, and that was during when was that? When did we even do that? I think it was '98, like early '98. I think I want to say. And we just did that at like a local guy in the neighborhood had a studio in it. He had an apartment much like mine with like a basement level, and he had like this little back pocket studio down there, you know. Um, or that's well, not like you know what I mean. It was like really small studio, very compact. And we just went down there and tracked that. And we had on that one, that's the one Mephiskapheles record. This is a trivia answer that Buford played on. Buford O'Sullivan plays on Necromantical Scream. So for all you Scott trivia nuts. Um, but yeah,
I'm glad
that
I
was
asked,
the
man.
cover of Celtic Frost. with Andre. I think Andre made his own lyrics though, but the music was based on the Celtic Frost record.
Hey, hey, King Tip. Hey, hey, King Tip.
We didn't go over your live release of the
Oh, yeah.
Supernova Ska Fest.
So you're gonna edit this, right? Like, is that the deal? Or you just
Yeah, I'm gonna edit this down. This
okay?
ain't
Okay, cool. Um, yeah, that was really stoked that that happened. Actually, that record happened, and that was because of Mike DiMatteo and Greg DeCrosta, and they, they did us, they did the Pie Tasters, and they did the Toasters, and I'm on two out of the three because I'm on the Toasters record too. So, um, but that, I mean, we for a live band to have never made a live record until now, like it was long overdue, and it came out great. I love it.
it did turn out awesome. It turned out, and it's way better than that bootleg I have of November 24th, 99. You
In
guys did.
Cleveland, is that the one? Is that the Cleveland bootleg?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, well, whole different lineup, first of all, for that. But like what's cool about the live at Supernova record is that those are all songs. Um, there's at least one song from every one of our releases on that, and none from the Muscle Shoals record. So that's like the companion piece to the Muscle Shoals. Like if they would have only come out closer together, you know what I mean? That would be the Old Testament and the New Testament, you know. But it is what it is. I mean, I have another killer live show in the can that could become an album in May, but it has to wait. It has to wait for the studio album to come out because it's got too many of those songs on it. So, but that was from we played in Cleveland for a Halloween gig last October, and they put it on the radio and they mixed it like to perfection. So
Oh shit! So it
I
might
talked to
already
this
be.
I talked to the station and they were into putting out as a record. So I just gotta that might be down the road.
Well, that would be awesome. What's with all these Cleveland shows?
Cleveland shows? Come on, I'm from Cleveland, and it's on the way to everywhere else. It's on the way to Chicago. I mean, Chicago's been one of our best markets since we first started touring, and Cleveland is an up and down market. It's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. It's one of those kind of places, but Chicago is always good, and Cleveland's on the way to Chicago. So now lately we go to Cleveland at my folks' house and we camp there, and then launch from there to Indiana or Illinois or Michigan. So it's I still maintain a lot of ties to Cleveland. Actually, I'm spending more and more time there. My mother's 83, and I need to go see her and look after things there. So I still go there a lot.